Welcome to the High Vibe Home Podcast, where we explore the ancient art of Feng Shui and how it can help you create a more harmonious and balanced living space. Whether you're a seasoned practitioner or new to the world of energy flow, this podcast is here to guide you on your journey towards a more intentional and peaceful home. Join us each week as we dive deep into the principles of Feng Shui, share practical tips for creating a high vibe home, and interview experts in the field of holistic living. Get ready to transform your space and elevate your energy as we explore the intersection of design, spirituality, and well-being. Well, hello everyone out there, beautiful, groovy souls. Welcome back to another episode of the High Vibe Home Podcast. It is so wonderful to be here once again. I hope you're all having a magnificent day, evening, morning, whenever you're tuning into the episode and this podcast. And I want to know, how are you liking season 2? We are back with some really amazing interviews, some Feng Shui insights, and really just cultivating how we can keep the energy up in our homes, because let's be real, it's kind of hard with so much energy often being exerted and so much happening in our lives. I find that the home is one of the more challenging places to actually get some solace and peace, right? But at the end of the day, our homes should not stress us out. They should support us. And a lot of times we take on a lot, and our homes can really be an opportunity to create more ease. So that's what we're about here. And here with us today, we have another amazing interview with a woman that I actually met here in Mexico. She is an amazing woman. Her name is ChaCha, and we actually used to live above her. Well, we rented a studio to work in and do my recordings and all that stuff when we were living on our boat part-time and then living on land. And she was right below us in this cute little condo, and we just sort of vibed. She's from Canada and she moved to Mexico as well. And we just see the world very similarly, just kind of seeing how we can live sustainably and all that good stuff. So I thought it'd be fun to have her on the show today. So I got to do an in-person interview, which is pretty rare. But ChaCha is an amazing intuitive designer and sculptor whose expertise really lies in creating spaces that embody the principles of Wabi Sabi. So she really works with nature and the natural ability of how things form, and she's very inspired by nature. So again, that's sort of why we kind of wanted to hang out and talk and discuss, how do we bring nature into our home? How do we create more natural environments that aren't so prone to, the digital world maybe, or even just feels like a home, right? So she's going to give us that insight today on how nature can serve as a guiding force in creating homes that resonate with tranquility and exceptional living, because you are worth living exceptionally. That is right. So I'd love to welcome ChaCha onto the show in just a moment here. I just want to let you all know that I still have a couple more consultations open for the month of June. So if you're interested in booking or working with me one-on-one to create a space that is aligned with some of the Feng Shui principles, or you are also interested in kind of just evaluating one room in your home, something feels off, I have packages for you. The link will be in the show notes. One more space available for June, and then I'm booked up till July. So if you're looking to get your space ready before summer, it's a perfect time. Let's do it. All right. I'd love to welcome ChaCha onto this podcast. Let's give her a warm welcome. Give me some shimmy or something, a shake. Woo! I love the name ChaCha. Let's get some cha-cha-cha in the house. All right. See you all on the other side. We have ChaCha with us. Yes, ChaCha, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. I'm excited.
Yeah. So a little backstory. Why are we recording in Mexico? What's going on? How did ChaCha and I connect? So I'm sitting in her beautiful apartment here in La Cruz de Juanacaxtla. This is a little kind of piece of magic in the Puerto Vallarta Bay. What was it, 2 seasons ago? We rented a place above you and we just connected over, you know what we connected over? Our style, our fashion.
Yeah, you had a really good a really great thing going on.
Yeah, and you did as well. She was wearing this beautiful like straw pointy witch hat. And I was like, okay, who is this woman? You know, you don't often find women who are embracing their like creative side through their clothing here in Mexico, especially in La Cruz, because this is a very sleepy fishing village and it's a very local community here. So yeah, I was intrigued. I was like, what does this woman do? She must be an artist. And so we connected, you know, over some wine at one point, some sushi, and lo and behold, she's actually not only an interior designer, but specializes in the concept of Wabi Sabi. So we have not talked about this much on the podcast at all. Maybe I've mentioned it as like something down the grapevine, but we have an expert here. Before we get into all that, I'd love for you to just tell us your story. Like, what led you to be here, being a designer under the kind of like principles and concepts within Wabi Sabi and maybe even in Mexico?
Right. Okay. Well, I'd have to start before Mexico. I was living in Spain and I decided I needed to come back to Toronto, not willingly. But I needed to really get into my sculpture. And it was in doing that process, which really took it took me about 2 years to really find that in myself. Mm-hmm. And it was something I knew I absolutely needed to do. So it didn't matter to me how much time it was taking. And I was like walking the streets and I was finding bits that I know now that are partly the Sabi side of it. I was like in nature and, you know, the Wabi part of it. And and I finally put a show together. Mm. And it was a woman, this really little fabulous pistol of a woman. She's just like, she's highly educated and she just has, she's a writer, a poet, she's an artist herself. And she says, ChaCha, you are a Wabi Sabi artist. And I said, I am? What is that?
What is that? Yeah.
And she said, oh, you need to, you know,
go down the rabbit hole, right?
Go down the rabbit hole, find out there's actual whole courses in universities. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay, so this was really intriguing to me. Okay, so I've lived in Toronto most of my life, so it's not new to me. And I got back, it was 2016, and I was in the Junction area of Toronto, and I have like these eagle eyes for like cool stores and cool things. And I saw this store across the street and I beelined it and found this most incredible store. It's probably one of the, it's actually quite famous, I would say, quite well known in the world of like really high-end furniture designers. It's a blend between Japanese artisans and mid-century modern furniture.
Oh, lovely.
And Japan and Denmark have a very interesting relationship. And I just happened to get there the day. This man, it's called Studio Tint, is this company. And he was setting up for an exhibition. So I was in that store 3 times that day. And I was just like, okay, I got to be involved with this store. It's just so cool. When I actually got to see his work, it was something that came over me, something that happened in me. And this is early on, by the way, when I was trying to find the art in me. His pieces were so simplistic. He makes these, I bought one. It's this plate. It's like this flat plate. It's made out of stainless steel. It's probably about 6 or 7 inches. He makes it out of stainless steel and he puts it in an acid bath and has a tiny little rim on it. It's not ornate. It's not, you know, everybody has a different calling to what art is, but what it did for me, and my friend explained it in a few words, it brings you to that still point in nature. And when I saw that, I was like, how did he get to that moment that he can bring me into the moment to simplify it that much? So that was my drive behind my art. And then when I explained that to my friend, she said, that's it, ChaCha. That is it. So, you know, we can talk a lot more about that, but I'm going to fast forward to like, it's always been like, I love helping people create beautiful homes. I believe everybody should be living in a beautifully designed home. And a friend of mine said, I'm not talking about design as in it has to be in a magazine. I'm talking about being a design for you. Yeah. Who the people are that live there. It needs to reflect their inner being. Yeah. So when they walk in, they go,
I'm home.
I'm home.
Yeah.
And so I can do it for people, but I was lacking some vocabulary. Right. And if you look up Wabi Sabi, I mean, there's so many books that have been written about it. I mean, there's a university program to try and teach it because it's complex. And to talk about, it's complex to talk about.
Right.
Because it's something you have to live. It's a philosophy.
So tell us a little bit about what is the Wabi Sabi philosophy? The
Wabi part of it is like living close to nature. And Sabi is living with the imperfection of perfection. And if I can just interject, when I was walking the streets of Toronto, because I got back and I thought, do I want a car? And I was like, no. Do I want a bicycle? No. I just wanted to walk and rediscover the city. And so I kept seeing these pieces and I was called to pick them up. And I didn't know why.
Right.
And what I was loving is the alchemical process of what nature does to objects, like could be anything, look what happens with wood. It gets petrified, or metal gets rusty, and it just has it creates art in itself, which I just think is quite beautiful. Might sound a bit weird, but it can be very beautiful. This has been like a huge piece that was missing for me of having the words, and I'm gonna get there and explain what happened. And when I help people with their homes, I love to teach.
Yeah.
We talked about that earlier. We're both like teachers, because when I've helped somebody with their home and then they move and they say, hey, ChaCha, look what I did. And they figured it out on their own. Like, I feel really like I've really championed something really cool for them, that they can take and do it without me, because I can't. There's only one of me that can go around. So finding the words has been really, really, really important. And last week I listened to a podcast every morning of this man. We'll just call him I'm going to call him a spiritual friend. He calls it a monologue, which sounds really, really, really dry. It's not a monologue. He's not a healer. He's not but he gets up every morning, and it gives us this dialogue about what we're doing here and what it's all about. And he gave the most beautiful one last week. And it was how nature has no ego. Nature just models itself, like a blade of grass models it from the past blade of grass, and the monkeys and trees and butterflies, they're just modeling each other. There's no ego attached. And when I was making my art, I realized when I saw that plate and how it took me to that moment that I had to get my ego out of the way. And the art scene in Canada is not really like that.
I don't know much about Canada. I've never been there yet, but I know we have a lot of Canadians who listen, so you can relate.
Okay, good. But it was really important for me to get my ego and put it on the side and let it come through whatever needed to come through. And when I was doing my art, I had no idea if it was any good, because my ego wasn't directing anything. It wasn't telling me if this is good or not. I had no idea until I got it out into the world. So coming back to this place of nature without ego explains a lot. Like, if we can go back to just a few years ago when the world went upside down, what did we want to do? We just wanted to be in nature. And we still want to be in nature. I mean, when we go into nature, we feel amazing, right? Because it's so perfect.
Yeah.
And there's no ego. You're not fighting against anything. When things are egoless, it doesn't influence us. Humans influence each other because we have egos.
Yeah.
Okay. So we want to be in nature, but we can't be in nature all the time. We have to work. We have to sleep. We have to cook in the kitchen. We can't do that. So my whole intuitive way of helping people is to bring nature into the home. And then you have no ego in the home. as you can tell, my life's made up of a series of stories. They all connect somehow, but I'm going to go back and tell you a story of when I was living in Western Canada. And there was this couple from Europe, and they had the most exquisite home. I mean, they could be in all the magazines. And she was giving me a tour of the home. And as we'd go along, I'd stop. And there was that moment again where there would be like usually three. There's usually three items. I don't know how it is with you, but usually there's three. Three's a really interesting number. And
yeah, it is. I work with three a lot.
Very important. Yeah. And there'd be three things. If you have three items and they were all made by somebody that put their ego on the side and they were just present and they made something really beautiful, and then you put three of them together, wow, you've got like a really powerful moment. It brings you to that stillness in nature. And that's, to me, ultimately what we are trying to achieve. So we need moments like that in our home. Like when I look in my home, everywhere I look, I like what I see.
Yeah.
And it works for me. It might not work for you. It might not work for Joe down the street, but it works for me. So to me, I want you and Joe and everybody to have that home that reflects that back to them, because, we can get really existential here, but I mean, we're all trying to be in the moment and creating these lives of being really, really present. We do yoga, we go out and do yoga, but that's a class, and then we got to come home again. right?
Yeah. Well, I think that you're also really shining light on, we live in square boxes, right? None of our homes are now designed with the principles of nature in mind. We're kind of put in these squares when I always say, like, some of us are not square. We're triangles, we're hexagons, we're octagons, we're all these different shapes. And to put us in a square actually takes us away from who we are at our core. So how do we then recreate that? And then, I don't have a lot of back understanding of Wabi Sabi, but it's like it's sort of the rabbit hole that I think kind of comes from living a life that puts you in present awareness with nature and bringing that into your space. So there's a lot of similarities with Feng Shui and with the Wabi Sabi design. I think that those two together are some powerful, like, magic to bring inside the home, because you're playing with the elements, you're bringing in nature, you're allowing yourself to feel home within who you are. And that's the thing that, we all as a society, like, we struggle with, because a lot of you out there, and myself included, have been there, feel uncomfortable in your own body. Feel uncomfortable. So what that looks like in your home and in your space. You don't actually love where you're living, and I think that the closer we get to natural, holistic, things into our space, the closer we get to finding that sense of peace and harmony. Because I walked in your space and I was like, yeah, I totally feel it. I feel that sense of intention, design, natural elements that are really, it feels like there's a presence of nature here. It feels like I could be on a mountain. You have a lot of metal element, actually, but then you've got a lot of wood element. So there's a lot of that sort of feeling like I'm really grounded here. I feel very stable, and to have a space that brings that energy out as soon as you walk in is really profound. And I think everybody gets to have that in the world, because none of us, I personally wasn't raised on this. I know you weren't. So it's relearning, a new way to live life that I think includes peace and harmony. And like you said, I never thought about it in terms of like kind of removing the ego, though that's a little layer that we get to explore for sure. So yeah, that's really quite lovely.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. It's, that's the practice. That's really the practice. And I think just, obviously, we're both very passionate about like just getting that message out of how important it is to be living well inside our homes. Because we know what it feels like to go to nature. If nature's disturbed, it doesn't feel very good.
So when you started sculpting as well, because this is also your craft, and if you were to see her home, there's her sculptures everywhere. And, I think that as an artist that you are, when you have found this ability to work with your hands and kind of create a shape that embodies this simplistic kind of way of life, because her pieces are they speak a lot, but they're simple and profound at the same time. And kind of like what your feeling was when you first explained with this bowl. What brought you to sculpting, and how did that really kind of connect the dots to Wabi Sabi?
I pay attention to what shows up in my life always. They're clues, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of bicycles that get stolen in Toronto. And it was summertime, and there had been a tire that had gotten chained to the tree. And I felt compelled to take this tire home. And I'm like, Jesus, you need to like check in with yourself a little bit, ChaCha, So I let it go. But the next day I saw another one, and I was like, okay, the universe is showing me something. Yeah. Just take it home. Now, what had happened is if you leave a bicycle tire in the sun long enough, it literally burns. It was burnt. And I wrote about this called Burnt Bicycle Tire. Anyway, I did this whole, I also write sometimes. So I got it home, and I would just stare at it and like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do with this thing. And then I'd walk away. Right. And it just took me a while.
And were you sculpting at this time?
Yeah, I was, I was exploring. I was exploring. And one day I got it. I went over and I pulled it apart. Do you know what happens when you pull a burnt bicycle tire apart?
I really don't, ChaCha. Please tell me.
You've never done this before, right? Nobody out there has ever done this except for me. Well, it made all these interesting little hieroglyphic, little like all the pieces became like a hieroglyphic letter. And I used them in my word. Like it was like the spelling on the Arches paper that I used. And I used it in all of this whole series.
Wow.
So it was like it was like having a chat with my art. It was, anyway.
Wow.
It was like, and it became this thing. But it took me, getting out of my ego, putting it on the side, not worrying about what it is, just following it. And so that's really Sabi. That is the real Sabi way. It's like when nature takes and it alchemizes it into something.
Which nature is really good at doing.
And all art to me comes from nature.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, it also, it is this like divine channel that comes through. And I love that you talked about the sort of the ego that needs to be sort of removed in order to, doesn't need to be, not everyone comes from that place, but when you do, it is this like stream and this flow, and to not have that in that moment, in that time is almost really liberating, because the mind, the ego, like we're so caught up in that from the day to day. And I think that the more that I've realized over my like journey with being interested in homes and design and energy and why it was so important to me. I mean, I had no idea I would end up here, but what I found is like the simpler I became within my environment, the less stressed or frustrated or anxious I would feel in my art, in my like writing, or in my just day to day, like within my being and my mindset. And I think that that's the part that also a lot of people forget, is their space is always affecting what's going on within. And when we have that ego mind, that chattering, all the things that come from that, it can get really quite noisy up in there.
Oh, mine's very noisy. Mine is so noisy.
I think that's why these things actually, for people like us, we're both Sages, by the way. So there's a lot of fire there. Yeah. But I think, and as an artist, so it's like, I think for the attraction of a simpler way of life, maybe minimal, Wabi Sabi, Feng Shui, these sort of things that have allowed us to find the simplicity. Like I talk a lot about the Tao and Taoism and how that really brings us to this understanding that when you just are in the present moment and you breathe and you take a breath and I listen to a lot of Wayne Dyer because he's one of my favorites, but he talks about the Tao, and he talks about it in a way that brings you to this place that's like our happiness is actually quite simple, but we live in a chaotic, complex world. And I think that these design elements coming to the more modern way of life is just to help us navigate the world around us from the outside. So like you said, we come back to home and we feel like we are home and we are safe from the outside world, and we can kind of go back into our cocoon and haven. So I think that this simple way of life is going to catch on a lot more. I hope that it does, because it really is an understanding that like we don't need a lot of things around us to be happy, and nature's perfectly imperfect, just as she is.
I think people are really seeking it.
Yeah.
Maybe not even understanding, but more people go to yoga all the time, and I think it's an actual thing, I mean, I didn't actually, as you know from this, didn't set out to be Wabi Sabi. Like, actually, I don't like being trendy. So when it happened, I was like, oh, it pops up everywhere.
Right.
But if I'm going to be trendy, okay, I'll be Wabi Sabi trendy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's okay.
Well, it pushes, like I said, that we can be at peace within ourselves, because when we go to nature, we feel that in some way. So it is a really good trendy thing to happen right now, I think. Yeah, right. It's definitely beneficial for a lot of us out there. So when you find yourself in this place of, your art and your sculpting and kind of incorporating that, do you feel like there's a specific like energy that comes with that? Or is it just kind of you flowing like when you're creating your art, because I feel like there's a lot of artists who kind of struggle with that a little bit. Like you seem like you've really found your thing, and for an artist that might be listening, what would you say for them to kind of let themselves go a little bit and just let the art move them?
Well, I would say that the letting go is the struggle.
Yeah.
And, that wonderful quote by Andy Warhol that says, just keep making art and let everybody else decide if it's good or not. Because when you're really in that place of making it from, whatever you call it, your higher self source, you don't know if it's any good. You don't know, because you're just like, I don't know what this bicycle tire thing is. Like, is it any good? And then something happens with it. So, yeah, I think that is the struggle. The struggle is letting it go. And after that, it's just a practice, I think, just sort of stay there. Mm-hmm. Like, I want to do something else again now. I've been doing this particular form of art for a while. I want to do something else. So I need to find some other things that inspire me, because I'm self-taught. I don't.
Yeah.
And I just look for things that I can make sculpture out of, Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I think you made a good point in terms of like letting go is the challenge, because we are all like society has trained us to be control freaks in so many ways, and that is the beauty of art, though. That's the beauty of what we're really discussing, I think, is in that art of letting go, that art of just surrendering.
That's right.
And being at peace with whatever is supposed to come out. My art teacher, because I went to design school, she had always told me that a mistake is a good one. Go with it. Like you've never made a mistake in art. So just if you have something that, didn't come out the way you planned, just roll with it. If the paint came out black and you meant for it to be yellow, roll with it, and that has really stuck with me. I was really blessed to have a really good teacher.
Yeah, that's very clever
because
she said that. Because I know a lot of people that get out of art school and have to unlearn a lot. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Would you consider there being like specific design elements that really make up the Wabi Sabi concept within a home? Like, do you really need to stay with natural elements usually?
As far as natural things. Oh yeah. I mean, for example, if you went out for a walk in nature and everything is just so perfect, and then you come across a plastic bottle of water that somebody left on the path, it just like, ooh, it just throws you off. It's like, this doesn't belong here. We know it doesn't belong in there. So why do we have that in our home? And I know that plastics have served us, and there's some good that's come out of it. But of course, we know it's gotten really out of hand, and now we have a big problem. But if you have natural fabrics in your home, if you have natural woods, you feel it. Yeah. You feel it. Like I have a friend who's got, just putting up with having these plastic chairs in her home, and she's had them for 2 years. And I said, well, why wouldn't you change them? I just haven't gotten around to it. But she's living with plastic. Do you know what I mean? So, and it bothers her, but she doesn't do anything about it. See, I think that's kind of important.
I think so
to change those up, as an example. Yeah. I think she's okay, but it's just, but it does. See, that's the thing. It takes up space in her emotional, mental cross. So if she changes them up, she'll go, I love my new chairs. I want to sit there and have my lunch or whatever it is, Right.
That's exactly a great point to make, because I think whenever I'm talking about, a lot of these things I think can get really complicated. Feng Shui, maybe Wabi Sabi feels a little complicated because you're not as familiar with being in a natural environment. A lot of the homes today, they're very modern. You walk in, it feels almost like it's sterile. And I feel those, it's like you're in a hospital and there's no life there. It's just very gray, very, bland, and one of the things that I always like to invite is whatever is pulling at you the most, like don't go fix everything. Don't do every remedy that's required, but whatever's like really bothering you, like you said with your friend in her chairs, start with that. But if something is pulling at your energy, your field, it's wild that once you change that, some other thing might happen in your life. Like there are other things that I've seen and witnessed people literally transform just in a very simple thing of moving something out of their home or decluttering or fixing that leaky sink, like those little things that, I think as someone who pays attention to these things now, looking back, when I didn't have this level of awareness, the home was not as symbolic of the inner world. It was more like, oh, I'm running around the world and it's just me, not realizing I take up space. My environment is that space I take up. So whatever I'm doing within my inner space reflects that. And those plastic chairs, it's like silly, but it actually probably, when you sit on a wood chair, you feel the difference,
Absolutely.
So
absolutely, because somebody actually made that wooden chair, whereas a machine poured chemical, synthetic, into a mold to make the chair.
Right.
It's that's the difference.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel good. We are natural beings and we need to live close to nature. And I know that sounds a bit preachy. I'm not a preachy person, but I really like to make my point clear with people. Yeah. It's affecting you. So be aware. That's when we do the yoga. That's when we go for walks in nature. When you get home and you go, oh, gee, I need to clean under my kitchen sink. And then you do it and you go, oh, geez, that was bothering me. Now the energy's okay under there, So like little things, I do something called the art of living because I think it's a whole kind of practice, like you do your thing with Feng Shui. And if I can add one more thing, nature is free. And when we live with less, we live in freedom. Yeah. Like I have just enough in my home. Can't bring too much more in. Yeah. But I'm not attached, Yeah. I could let it go, except for my knives, my chef knives. There's certain things I would take, but I can make art. I can make art everywhere I go. So
and that's, I think, the beauty is learning to really understand what you really do need to live.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
The world is in such flux right now, and you might want to be kind of able to maneuver your life pretty quickly if you need to.
Right.
And I know people that are really enslaved in their homes and because they just don't know how to live without it. And thankfully I've gotten rid of all my things before. I know how I can do that. It's not the end of the world. We are naturally abundant.
Yep.
You know, when I lived in Spain the first time, I had to have a little sale when I left because people gave me things. I had beautiful things. It's like, wow, we naturally just accumulate.
Yep.
You know, so I stop people at the door now. It's like, nope, not bringing that in here. Yeah. I don't need any more things, you know, but we don't have to stress out. We don't have to worry about it. Life provides, nature provides, you know,
and that's the deeper part of, I think, the unraveling of this story is the story a lot of us have been programmed to believe is coming down from generations of scarcity. This sort of like new approach to living maybe with less or minimal or Wabi Sabi, feng shui, whatever it is. I think that it really brings us back to healing that part, that wound of ours that feels like we don't have enough, you know, that we're not naturally abundant. So it leaves us in fear. And, you know, I can relate to that. We both can relate to this. We're not sitting here saying we've figured it out. By any means.
Definitely not.
So, you know, if you are somebody that is listening that struggles with the letting go process or having, you know, you are enslaved by your home, you know, really just think about, and I think my invitation for you is to process why you feel that way, to dig deep within you. And maybe this will be your rabbit hole spark of initiation, but the more that you learn to heal that wound of there's not enough, or I don't have enough, or I need to hold on to this because I don't want to have to go then buy it again, or whatever that story is, as soon as you identify that, you start to realize there's a thread of them all over you. And again, it's something that I've been learning to work through because a lot of our history, our ancestors come from, you know, the Great Depression. We come from all these times in the world that had great sorrow, and we're kind of in another one, you know? And so let's not repeat those patterns. Let's change them up a little bit and realize that we are abundant and we don't need to have all those things. And the scarcity trap of saying we're not enough and we don't have enough is I think the complete opposite of Wabi Sabi.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I came down here with 2 suitcases. I brought some lights. I'm really big on my lighting.
Oh, girl, I can tell. Yeah, no, lighting will, my husband and I always say, will make you fall in love on a first date or have you running for the door. Good lighting, you know?
Yeah. I think it's just being aware, you know, just be super aware. If you're not coming into your home and you're going, you know, then be aware of that. Have a look around, start noticing things and why it might be that way, you know. What could you change?
If it gets too complicated, we tend not to do it.
Well, exactly. You know, too complicated. What happens is the brain shuts down. Like, can I just share? Have we got time for one more quick story?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay. So I had a very good friend in Toronto. He was a really prominent psychiatrist. And he told me how when you go into a room, you see this, another one of these little stories that links it all together. And he said, when you go into a room, you know, you see, you know, brown chair, refrigerator, blah, blah, blah. Your brain is taking all of that in. Every time you walk into a room, your brain, it's a computer, it's working. When I used to be a sales rep, if I gave people more than 3 choices, their brains would shut down and they'd walk away. I had goosebumps on that. So, and it's the same in your home. If you're getting overwhelmed in your home, you got to break it down.
Yeah.
You got to slow down, let go of what you don't absolutely love and need. If you can follow that rule, you're probably halfway there already, you know, but your brain is going to be taking all that in and it's busy. We've got busy brains. We're overwhelmed with so much going on. So, because we're highly visual. You know, I know with Feng Shui it's a little more than that, but, you know, there's feeling the room and all of these things we can get into, but we're highly visual people.
True. Yeah.
So the visual part's really, really important. You know?
Yeah. And I think just because I've been on this like path of simplifying my life for the last 5 years, you know, the last piece for me was in my like clothing, because everything I would buy would always be very like a statement piece. Which is great. I love that. And I also needed things that I didn't have to think about. I was like, okay, more minimalist approach, throw on some good jewelry, a hat, and it's a done deal, you know? And for a traveling lifestyle too, being a little more nomadic, I had to start adopting those. And it really helped me. And I think I've now started to feel how that simplicity has impacted me on the day to day, because I'm not spending as much time thinking. I'm not giving myself a million options. I'm breaking it down, like you said, with the threes. And maybe it's, okay, these are my 3 options. So when you're kind of starting, I feel like you have to start even smaller. Like, okay, it's one thing to say, get rid of things, but it's another thing to get into your closet and just start there, you know, or go in your kitchen and remove all the plastic and bring something else in. You know, it's like breaking things down into small micro projects so that every maybe month or so you get down to less and less, right?
Yeah, it takes time. It's like building a wardrobe. Like it takes time to build a wardrobe, you know, like I'm a real thrifter. So, you know, I don't buy anything that I don't like.
Yeah.
And I have a really great wardrobe now because I've intentionally bought pieces I like. Mm-hmm. Same with your home.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So don't just have some chair because, you know, Donna down the street gave you that chair. Like, you don't like the street or the chair? Like,
maybe the street even too.
Yeah, give it to the street. Give it to the street. We can do that in Toronto. I don't know about. So yeah, it's really, really important. I mean, this is our life. We need to make it amazing. Amazing. And we have so much time in our home. So that's why you and I click, because we're so passionate about this, about helping people live these exceptional lives, you know. Yeah.
And it all starts right at your home.
It sure does.
Well, thank you so much, ChaCha, for coming on and storytelling with us and really enlightening us on this concept of Wabi Sabi. Thank you all for listening. And where can we find you for your source of inspiration, your magic, and maybe if someone's curious of, you know, working with you down the road?
Oh, sure. Well, I have a website, ChaCha Chapin, ChaChapin.com. If there's Instagram people out there, it's actually, I had to add an extra cha because there's a lot of cha-chas out there. So it's ChaCha Chapin. And through there, I've got a link tree. And people can find me, find different things that I do. Yeah. So thank you. And thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
You guys know you can also get all the links in the show notes as well. So
okay. Yeah.
Thank you, all of you for listening. I hope that this podcast uplifted you up and really just leaves you feeling like living with maybe just a little bit less and bringing nature into your home. All right, everyone. Until next time, don't forget to let that chi flow. Bye for now.